I will continue the Gambia's presentation of evidence by discussing Mongnu, another village in northern Rakhine State, where Myanmar engaged in horrific acts of violence and labeled it clearance operation. My colleagues described the acts of genocide that took place in Mingi and Chutping. I will address how, on 27 August 2017, Myanmar security forces also launched a large-scale attack in Mongnu against innocent, unarmed Rohingya civilians. As the evidence will demonstrate, what occurred in Mongnu was not an isolated event. It was deliberate, organized assault that closely mirrored the pattern of clearance operation carried out in other villages across northern Rakhine State. The reports of the UN fact-finding mission, multiple witness testimonies, and other independent investigations show that the clearance operation in Mongnu followed the same modus operandi and resulting in the same devastating consequences: indiscriminate attacks, the separation and killing of men and boys, the widespread sexual violence against women and girls, and the burning of homes to erase Rohingya from Myanmar's map. Mr. President, honorable members of the court, Myanmar conducted a brutal clearance operation in Mongnu, as shown on the screens before you. Mongnu, known in Rohingya as Monupara, is located in Budidong Township within the Chindamar village tract. Prior to August 2017, Mongnu was home to roughly 400 Rohingya households. In the days before the clearance operation, the population increased as residents from nearby Pongtampeng fled in Mongnu, seeking safety after a similar operation there 2 days earlier. Many believed that they would be protected if they sheltered in a prominent compound at the heart of the village, a place owned by families known to have long-standing ties with the security forces. They were wrong. What followed on 27 August was a carefully orchestrated attack that unfolded with chilling predictability. The clearance operation in Mongnu resembled those in other villages in 4 important aspects. First, the Tad Madao's operation in Mongnu likewise involved indiscriminate attacks against Rohingya civilians, including children. According to the UN fact-finding mission, upon arriving at Mongnu, the Tad Madao split in coordinated squads and advanced into the village on foot, rounding up the villagers. Several witnesses identified the soldiers as being from the 564th Light Infantry Battalion. Since the military bases had long operated near the village, certain soldiers were known and readily recognizable by the residents. The soldiers opened fire on fleeing villagers as they moved inward into the village. As one witness testified in a signed statement, the military started firing as they made a circle inside the village and brought all the people to the place where they were killed. Another witness described how the military surrounded the village from all sides and started firing. In the witness's words, and I quote, "When they found the people in front of them in the village, they killed them," close quote. The troops converged on the compound where Rohingya were gathered. They then pounded on doors, ordering people to come out of the house and threatening to set the houses on fire. Once the doors were forced open, soldiers burst inside and fired, kicking out those who were screaming and trying to escape. One witness describes how those in houses heard the sounds of guns, the sounds of bullets, which went on and on. Another woman recounted how the soldiers methodically killed those in the houses, They first opened fire, and then when the people were weak, they mutilated the bodies with long knives. The gunfire did not spare children. Multiple witnesses reported to the UN fact-finding mission that during this encounter, a young child was struck in the head by a bullet fired by the military and died shortly afterward. A witness testified in his signed statement that a 10-year-old boy was hit and his brain came out from his head. Second, as elsewhere, the Tatmadaw in Mognu singled out men and boys and killed them in deliberate, organized manner. Once inside the compound, the soldiers separated the men from the larger group of civilians. The women and children were locked in similar houses where screams could be heard. The men and boys were beaten, bound, and dragged into the shared courtyard. They were then lined up in smaller groups and ordered to kneel or lie face down. According to eyewitnesses, the soldiers took the men out of the house and tied them up, their hands behind their back with a rope or with headscarves. Soldiers forced them to lie with their chests and face down on the ground. One interviewee described to Amnesty International that the soldiers forced him to lie down in the courtyard and kicked him right by his left eye before tying up his hands with a rope, while repeatedly calling him and his brother Kalar. One of the men who owned the compound, Zahid Hussein, was among the first to be killed. He was stabbed to death in the stomach, while two soldiers restrained him. After Zahid Hussein was stabbed, he was heard screaming that everyone should come out of the house because the soldiers were going to burn it down. Hearing his scream, two of his sons came out, but both of them were shot dead. The soldiers then proceeded to execute the remaining men and boys who were either kneeling or laying face down on the ground with their hands tied. According to eyewitness accounts, prior to the execution, a soldier from the 564th Light Infantry Battalion was heard speaking on the phone in the courtyard. He was heard asking, "Boss, we have caught 87 people. What should we do?" He was heard asking. At the end of the call, the soldier turned to the others and relayed the order. "We killed them." What followed were summary executions carried out systematically, victim by victim, with guns and knives. That killing en masse is corroborated by multiple witness statements and reports, including from the UN fact-finding mission, Human Rights Watch, the Associated Press, Fortified Rights, and Amnesty International. Quoting the words of one interviewee, the UN mission reported that some of the men and boys were shot first and their throats were slit with a knife. Others just had their throats slit. One survivor told Fortified Rights that the soldiers took away people in groups of 2 and 3, and one by one hacked on the back of their necks. Another witness, interviewed by the International State Crime Initiative of the Queen Mary University, described how a soldier from the 564th Battalion put a knife to the temples of the victims and used it to cut the back of their necks, while other victims were shot at close range by others behind them. Several of those in the courtyard were young children who were stabbed to death. One woman described how the Tatmadaw killed her male family members, and I quote, "The courtyard was full of blood. They killed my husband, my father-in-law, and my 2 nephews of 15 and 8 years old. They even killed the child in the same manner." Close quote. Some men were led from the courtyard to a nearby scrubland and murdered there. Another woman, 50 years old resident, described how the soldiers grabbed as many as they could and found in front of them, adding that, "My people were taken like this from the house to the edge of the hillside and shot." In a signed statement, one witness whom the court will call next week recounted how he nearly escaped death that day. His hands had been bound as he waited as the military began to take groups of 5 to 6 people to another place to kill them. He watched in terror as the military seized his 80-year-old father, who was executed and placed atop of a pile of dead bodies. When the soldiers ordered his group to stand, the witness broke free and fled. He was struck in the arm by a bullet but survived, and now appears to testify in these proceedings before this honorable court. Third, the clearance operation in Mongnu also involved brutal sexual assault and violence, including rape. Women fleeing from gunfire were seized, stripped, and subjected to body searches that devolved into sexual assault. Some were raped, and others were mutilated and killed. One survivor recounted to the UN fact-finding mission how, as she fled towards the hills to escape the shooting, soldiers caught her and gang-raped her in her husband's presence. In her words, and I quote, "3 members of the military took me. One man held me down and pushed me to the ground. They tore off my clothes. 2 men raped me. My husband could still see me." Close quote. The witness was not alone. According to her, the Tatmadaw took many other women, maybe around 10 to 20 women at different times. She saw those women being raped as well. Another witness who was hiding behind described a woman being violently killed by being stabbed in her genitals. Myanmar dismisses these accounts as being uncorroborated. In doing so, Myanmar simply ignores the clear determination by the UN fact-finding mission, based on multiple eyewitness accounts, that the women and girls were also gang-raped and killed and mutilated in Mongnu. The sexual violence in Mongnu was not limited to acts of rape. When separating women from the men, the soldiers stripped women naked, took any valuable items, and ripped off their headscarves. Based on multiple interviews with women from Pongtamping and Mongnu, Amnesty International reported that many women were sexually assaulted during these body searches for valuables. Fourth, as in other villages, the clearance operation in Mongnu culminated in the destruction of Rohingya homes and the concealment and removal of bodies. UNISAD analysis of satellite imagery confirmed that in both Mongnu and neighboring Pongtamping, more than 300 structures were destroyed by fire. Witness accounts confirmed that the Tatmadaws used launchers to burn the houses. After executing the men and boys, soldiers were seen moving bodies from the courtyard into military trucks, which drove to the nearby army base. Other soldiers were seen burying bodies into shallow pits nearby. Human Rights Watch similarly reported in October 2017 that the soldiers were seen gathering the bodies on green tubs and loading them into pushcarts before taking them to military vehicles. Witnesses who returned to the village after the clearance operation saw body parts, including those of children, scattered on the ground, which felt sticky from blood. One witness recalled that the field was streaked with blood.